people have called you the voice of your generation.
No comment.
Guess what's okay? I thought it had technically good songs. I know Rodrigo said that she attended a college English class, I think it was, that helped her songwriting. I think she also mentioned learning to write better chords. So you can tell that this album was more polished than Sour. I really liked how Guts evoked intense emotions from sadness to happiness. The vocals were vocaling. All the sonic elements from Sour seemed intensified on this album. The theatrics, the rock, the tonal shifts were also intensified from Sour within songs and throughout the album as a whole. But the song switch-ups were done better than the album's tonal shifts. The album often had ballads following its upbeat tracks. I found that with so many shifts happening within songs and from the track listing as a whole, like the way the track listing was set up, all the songs kind of blurred together for me. Like, I think it would have worked better if they had placed the upbeat songs at the beginning, have the mixed tracks in the middle, and then end with the ballads. That would have made more sense. That's just me, though. Like, I know people love the drama switch-ups. I do too. It's kind of Rodrigo's signature style, but it's overdone on Guts. The themes from Sour were also intensified. Heartbreak, angst, manipulation, insecurity, envy, etc., etc. Done right, you get songs like Making the Bed, Getting Back, and Teenage Dream, where you get some insight into Olivia's pathos. Which, speaking of Olivia's pathos, from this album, I get the feeling Olivia isn't doing well being a pop star or in general, and it was a little unsettling. The performance styles from Sour has also escalated on Guts. I already mentioned the campiness. There are rock screams on here, more shouting. There's more humor on this album, which was very fun. Rodrigo's biggest appeal, for me, is how she isn't perfectly cookie cutter. There's edge there.
Hey, what that mouth do? What that mouth do?
Not fully rockstar edgy, but she'll prick you like a thorny rose. Now, doubling down on Sour's formula worked for some parts of the album, but overall it felt generic. You can tell that this album was supposed to be technically good, but not Olivia Rodrigo good.
But I guess on this album, I did a lot more polishing.
It felt like she was playing it too safe on here. From how formulaic it was from Sour, it came across to me like fan service, and it just seemed stagnant. And the fact that Sour was framed as Rodrigo's high school years, it makes Guts seem juvenile. Okay, like I mentioned earlier, there was a strong sense of stagnation all throughout this album.
Feel the same, I hang out with the same people, I still have the same insecurities and fears.
Many people picked up on how similar Guts and Sour is, and I agree completely. This project is too similar to Sour to an alarming degree. Rodrigo's defenders have mentioned that the point of Guts is about her not growing up, relishing her last years as a teenager, introducing us to the growing pains coming into her adulthood. So it makes sense that this sounds like Sour. Well, you know what? If that's the case, make Guts into an EP, a mixtape, or the deluxe edition to Sour, because detailing a halfway point between point A to point B isn't album worthy. In my opinion, albums are destinations, not halfway points. Some say the newness here is in its production. Rodrigo has fully leaned into the pop rock sound. Certain outlets have even called her a rock star. To this, I say BS. Okay, there's new punk and rock instrumentals on the upbeat songs, but most of these elements were heard on Sour. It just got intensified. Are we really counting on how much rockier she got on Guts? Because to me, all I'm hearing is Sour had rock, and now Guts has more rock. Still rock. Like, those instrumentals don't register to me as someone who doesn't know much about punk or rock, so, I mean, I don't know. Then people say that there's new themes on Guts. She talks about body image issues, her relationship with fame, and the POV has changed from extrospection on Sour to introspection on Guts. And her songwriting has developed more, which I'll agree with the songwriting thing. I don't know much about songwriting, so who knows. All I know is I'm privy to more allegorical lyricism, something more abstract rather than straight out of a journal. So I wasn't into Rodrigo for the songwriting. With the new themes called Bull Again, all she did was take the poignant one-liners from Sour and made whole songs out of them. These one-liners already had a lot of attention to them, so when she made them into songs on Guts with little change, it seemed like fan service and very formulaic. Opinions on the POV change, I agree with that. I have to admit there's some major introspection on Guts that helps the consumers get a better sense of Rodrigo's pathology, which I really enjoyed. But I'm only giving points on the POV. I'll talk more about the introspection later on. And to close out this section, let me say I understand pop music is all about working off a tried-true formula and putting new twists on it, but Rodrigo doesn't take anything and make it her own. There was no identity. Even listening throughout this album, all the new elements seemed too familiar, or it was too generic. Like, there were moments where I questioned, where's Olivia? Like, where's her voice? Because throughout the album, she's role-playing as different artists, singing the songs she wrote. Like, she can't stop acting. And I understand every artist has a level of acting they do when they perform, but it's just an exaggerated version of their identity. The thing is, Rodrigo hasn't formed an identity, so it doesn't work for her, in my opinion. Now let's talk about the visuals of this era and project. Everything I see from Guts has reminded me of Sour. I understand that it's important to have a strong brand, but can someone on her team take notes from Ariana, Ice Spice, and Nicki Minaj? Just have a couple of defining consistent elements and modify everything else. Like, why is it this hard? I'm probably being real obtuse. It's probably easier said than done. But look, you got the same clean girl makeup, the same color scheme, the same pretty long brown hair. It gets pretty tiring pretty quick. Makes me think that this era was a cop-out. Her team knew what worked the first time. It kept spewing out the formula. Even her graphics look the same. Like, I can't with this. But looking at this photo referencing her Sour cover art, great stuff. They should keep doing stuff like this. I'd be more receptive towards it. But please, cool it with the purple. So I already talked about how Guts and Sour were too similar sonically and aesthetically. Now I'm going to talk about why I feel this project seemed very high school. Okay, so aside from the fact that Rodrigo rehashed the same themes from her teen project, Sour, it looks real bad that this new LP that came out in her 20s is referencing her high school album Super Hard. Like, if this came out right after Sour, I would give it more grace. And so many reviews have mentioned that this album is all about relishing childhood. So yeah, this album is young, but shouldn't be stigmatized as immature. To me, this album comes across as a teen tantrum rebelling against coming of age, where being a drama queen or king is no longer acceptable.
I love being dramatic because why would you ever deal with any emotion in a logical way when you could have the option of absolutely losing your mind?
I've heard people try to say that there's maturity in this album. It's in the songwriting, which I'll agree with that. Okay, I already said that. Fine, whatever. But is it really maturity if you're writing songs about youthful struggles? But I don't know if it's really maturity if you're writing songs about struggles in your youth that pertains to your youth. Like, I don't know. There's a lot of mind games with this kind of concept. I'm just calling bull. You know, like, maturity discourse in this album made me question what is maturity and how are the critics and Olivia viewing maturity. And I listened to this NPR interview that Olivia did where she said this.
I mean, I wrote Sour when I was 17 and I wrote most of Guts when I was 19 and 20. And I just think those few years in between 17 and 20 are probably like some of the most formative that you'll ever have in your life. I think I grew so much just as a person, as a young woman. I think I just wanted Guts to maybe reflect that maturity. I think that I'm a little bit more self-possessed and more confident and know what I want to say more. And I think the record is also kind of fun and a little cheeky at times.
And it made me think that maybe the growth in this album, the maturity in it, is in its vulnerability. How open Rodrigo was about her flaws and proclaiming how she doesn't need to pretend to be older than she is, trying to be comfortable with her youth. And you know what? I can understand that. That's pretty mature to recognize that you have to take your time growing up into adulthood without following the crowd and playing grown up. Now, how does that come across in Guts? Well, people mentioned her new introspection on the album, being self-aware. Then there's more cussing and overt references to intimate activity. Okay, I can buy the cussing, the adult activity, but the introspection and the self-awareness, I'm skeptical. Let's put it into context. Being self-aware is a mature trait. We saw a level of self-awareness in Sour that many people saw as mature for Rodrigo's age, but her transferring that same level of introspection onto Guts, where she just changed the quantity of how introspective she is, doesn't mean maturity. When talking about Olivia, the level has remained the same since Sour. It's only on a couple of songs where she's actually amped up the level of introspection, like dug deeper into her decision-making process. And I give her points on those couple of songs, but this whole album, not gonna cut it. For the most part, she stayed the same as she's done on Sour. Another reason why Rodrigo's self-awareness on Guts falls short for me is that this level of introspection is the bare minimum.
What is this?
With all the public and online discourse we've had about accountability, culture, cancel culture, the social media trends where people are highlighting their toxicity, I don't find Rodrigo's level of insightfulness mature for her age. It seems pretty normal to me that someone of her age would be that self-aware. In fact, it's the new norm. The amount of self-awareness on Guts felt a little late, actually, because people were calling out Olivia about her lack of insightfulness during the driver's license controversy, and she had the opportunity to really dive into it on Sour, but instead she dipped a toe into it and then fully committed on Guts. And P.S. I have to mention this, the bratty teen rock performance thing Rodrigo was doing all over this album didn't help with the maturity. So, that's just my opinion. Okay, so I want to just elaborate on why I thought that Rodrigo was being inauthentic on Guts. You know, I mentioned this earlier, but a huge point of contention for me was that, you know, I see Olivia being marketed as a rock star, pop punker, I don't know, and I just don't buy it. To me, Olivia doesn't sell the rock star persona. Looking at the quote from The Guardian, they mention her being a student of rock, which is a perfect way to describe Rodrigo's relationship to rock. She's very technical. She knows how to change her inflections, how to scream, but it's not organic.
That's not what we want. That's not what we want. Okay.
Need I say more? Like I said in the beginning, she gives off an edgy girl next door, very much a thorny rose, not gritty like a rocker or punk. And I know she's talked about trying to feminize rock, but I mean, at a certain point, you gotta call it like you see it, like it's not rock at a certain point.
I'd like to think that I make pop music that is adventurous. I love rock music and folk music and singer-songwriter music, obviously. There's a little bit of sprinkles of that in there.
People forget punk isn't just a genre, it's a whole culture. It doesn't matter how many pop punk songs you make, you have to be part of that culture. And I don't know much about punk or rock. What I do know is that there's specific outlets for punks. There's a history, there's gatekeepers, even a diluted form of punk, pop punk, still has cultural rules it adheres to. So now looking at Olivia, have you seen her align herself with any cultural significant punk or rock figures or platforms outside of work? That should tell you she isn't about that life. And it's off-putting sometimes in the music because she doesn't fully commit to the punk or rock sound. Vox had an article where they referenced an interview Olivia did for Teen Vogue where they speculated that she took to rock because it was a perfect genre for her to express her repressed rage. I've seen people say that that's part of her appeal, always feeling restrained, caged in, and angsty, but that only works if you know your artist can go full out. If not, then it falls flat. Well, let's move on to the critical reviews of this album. All the major publications had rave reviews about Guts. And listen, you guys, I wanted to like Guts a lot more than what I initially felt, so I sought out reviews to maybe get a better appreciation for the album. But I quickly found out that everyone was saying the same things and had little to no cons about the album. It made me a little freaked out. NME was calling her a generational talent, and Rolling Stone was calling Guts a classic, which made me call BS. What happened to balanced reviews? I wouldn't have minded the 10 out of 10 stars or whatever, as long as the review had some bad with the good. But even when publications showed some cons, it was either in the middle of the review or at the end. It'd usually be a sentence or two, and that was it. Maybe these writers were afraid of being targets of stan culture. I can't blame them. It's understandable. Maybe the industry is overcorrecting how they mistreated female pop stars post-Free Britney, and or maybe the industry is so thirsty for talent to fill the pop star void, they'll support anyone with any level of talent. I bet if Guts was released in the music industry's better days, it'd be the hype equivalent to Florence and the Machine's Lungs or Kid Cudi's Man on the Moon, 1 or 2. Well received, critically and commercially, but no one is expecting these people to be the next superstars.
I'm no Mariah Carey or anything.
That's what prompted me to make this video. People pushing their labels on Rodrigo prematurely. She's obviously still growing. The reviews from the local and college papers, thank God, were more level-headed, because all this overhypedness from the major outlets, it was just getting to me and it was getting really annoying. And not to mention, all of this praise happening prematurely has a lot of consequences. And good on Rodrigo for keeping a leveled head through it all. Speaking of praise, looking at the myriad of reviews, I noticed how some reviews were vastly contradictory to the other. Pitchfork talked about how this project showed Rodrigo moving towards escapism music.
Olivia's album is not personal in that way. Like, there's no like red scarf detail or anything like that. It's mostly her inhabiting tropes and like playing with them very well, or being like clever within those tropes, but she's not bearing it all. And also in interviews, she is really reticent to get specific, especially about like the gossipy things. So I think that's kind of an interesting thing to note here, is maybe moving away from this more confessional singer-songwriter type of mode back to a form of escapism, but that still is real and sort of grounded in real emotions.
Another outlet said Guts was her most intimate work. Another article called Guts Gutless. It makes me think that no one really has the answers or really knows how to talk about this album or knows what's going on. Like, I don't know. And Olivia has been tight-lipped about the whole thing. She won't talk about the songs, but she's given a couple of statements on what the album is about. The whole thing makes me think Olivia is trolling us. She literally dropped a project and said, y'all figure it out. And this makes me skeptical about her artistic abilities. There's some really deep think pieces out there about Guts praising Olivia for her abilities, and I'm really side-eyeing the whole thing. I don't need her to drop names, but she needs to talk about the songs so I can gauge her abilities. The general public, too, for that matter, also needs to hear about the songs. Like, come on. Like, I will say that there was an op-ed from Teen Vogue that helped me see Guts in a new perspective. Like, I'm not just gonna sit here and rag on it and say that there's no substance to it. But this Teen Vogue article, there was a part where the writer mentioned interviewing Olivia during her debut era, saying this: she's been playing adult for years, ever since she stepped on a film set. When you're in the industry, you're sort of treated like a child, but expected to act like an adult, Olivia told me in 2021. Meanwhile, she's been aspiring toward an older age in her personal life, from her freshman efforts, Where's My Effing Teenage Dream, to She's So Much Older Than Me, She's Everything I'm Insecure About. On Sour, she actively questioned her girlhood as she was experiencing it. Now she's a little older, expected to be more mature and wanting to be, but still seen as young above most anything else. On Guts, her youth has begun to feel like a trap. Okay, so reading that, I thought to myself, was Guts an act of rebellion? Rodrigo bucking at the industry and the public that consumed her childhood, making a statement that she's gonna grow up when she wants to, but first she's gonna indulge in her most childish tendencies one last time. Then my theory was confirmed when reading this review. So knowing that context, it helps me appreciate Guts more. It also makes me interested in Olivia as a celebrity, but I still don't mess with the music that much. I might replay a song or two off this album and move on. So basically, the backstory is the most interesting about this album. Unfortunately, the songs don't really live up to that context. So yeah, too bad. Lastly, before I close out this video, I want to say I was really interested in where Rodrigo was going to take her sound on Guts. I liked her alt-rock sound, but I liked her alt-pop sound more. I was thinking maybe she'd be more Florence and the Machine, or I don't know, something more alternative pop. I wanted her to touch on her slew of controversies, being ripped off by veteran artists, the racial debates surrounding her, and I really wanted to know more about her identity. This era, I expected her to be more self-assured, being comfortable in the limelight, but I had to ask myself if all these things I wanted was reasonable. Rodrigo hadn't had time to catch her breath, working on Guts while on tour and promoting Sour, so did she have enough time to figure out her artistry? I don't know. Throughout this whole process, I realized for me, Guts' value is in its intentions, the messaging, the lyrics, and its packaging. The sound, on the other hand, not so much. I read this album as Olivia's crossroads moment. She talked about how uncomfortable she was with celebrity and people's expectations, and alluded to mental health issues all over this album. So now I'm wondering, will she continue to be a pop star, or will she prioritize the craft and be an artist? Because it seems like she isn't doing well trying to be both. Heck, she might take a hiatus. She needs a break. And I have to be honest, looking at all the rave reviews and seeing the massive success Rodrigo was able to have, it made me a little bitter. There's been so many instances where my faves have been snubbed at the irrelevant VMAs, dismissed to perform, being shelved and sabotaged after proving themselves, and this girl lucked into all this success and has industry backing. I'm not blaming Rodrigo, but the industry is so irritating. And humor me a bit, I feel like with Rodrigo, the industry is getting a little closer and cracking the code and breaking in new acts. if they figure out a winning formula, all the cons that came from label domination will come with it. And that scares me. So anyways, that's all I have for today. Please comment, like, subscribe. Thank you. Bye-bye.